Blockchain Chatter, presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in Fintech executive search. Welcome to Blockchain Chatter News, your monthly roundup and dissection of interesting news headlines and developments across blockchain and digital assets. I'm your host, Dexter Cousins, and my co-host, as always, is Chloe White. Chloe was Australia's inaugural National Blockchain Roadmap lead and former advisor to the Australian government on crypto asset innovation. She's now playing a key role in policy development and regulation globally through her advisory business, Genesis Block. Chloe joins me today from Croatia to discuss the latest blockchain and digital asset developments and share her insights on what is happening across the globe. Chloe, great to see you again and welcome back.
Thanks, Dexter. Lovely to see you.
I think last time we caught up, you were in the Middle East. Could you mind tell us a bit about what you've been up to since we last caught up?
That's right. Last time we caught up, we talked about the launch of the virtual asset licensing regime in Dubai. And I'm now in Europe for the third time this year. It's been a great year so far, hasn't it? I'm in Croatia at an academic conference talking about stablecoins and CBDCs. And I also had an opportunity recently to guest lecture for Cambridge University. They have an executive education course on virtual assets. And so I spoke to an audience of regulators about policy principles there. And that was really interesting. And I enjoyed being a part of that. The other thing I've been up to is, and this is off the back of the launch of the licensing regime in Dubai, is talking to lots of different businesses who have an interest in obtaining licenses in Dubai. So, there's a lot of activity happening in the policy space. But I think, we're certainly seeing a lot of debate and discussion across blockchain virtual assets in political and policy circles at the moment. So it's nice to also be working on some constructive, progressive projects in Dubai and in other places around the world too.
Yeah, awesome. Now, it's been probably a crazy couple of months since we last caught up. We'll talk about this a little bit later around what we've seen in the banking system. But the other thing that's happened, and I don't know if you've noticed this as well, but obviously the AI has gone crazy, and mainstream attention is being paid to it. But it almost seems to have been hijacked by the crypto community. What's your kind of sense on AI and the role that it plays within digital assets?
I think people in the virtual asset industry are very excited about programmability and automation. And so it's very obvious why people in the blockchain space are really interested in AI at the moment, because we've started to see the fruition of many years of work in AI models where we have things like ChatGPT and AutoGPT that are getting a lot of attention in tech circles. And the mainstream is aware of these and is starting to play with them as well. And one thing I've observed is that those conversations have transitioned from nerdy tech circles into mainstream very, very quickly. There's I think an easier penetration and grokking of the concepts of some of these models. And I think that looking at emerging technologies as a whole, AI has probably done the best job of all of the emerging technologies in telling its story.
Yeah.
Selling itself as, we can help find breakthroughs in, treatments for cancer and all of these things that everybody understands why they're value adding and important straight away.
Yeah.
It doesn't rely on esoteric concepts or advanced economic concepts or financial engineering, all these other things where it's not obvious to the everyday person what their value is. And so coming back to the intersection with virtual assets, I think that what people in the blockchain industry see is that a lot of these AI tools are complementary assets. If you can have AI automation and link that through to your smart contracts or your DAO, or in reverse, if you can use a DAO to govern and own and manage AI assets, you can see how these technologies can complement each other, and the innovation that we're now seeing come through, where people are building on each other's innovations. So that idea of complementary value, where you combine these things, has got people quite excited. And in the blockchain space, I think because of where we are in the market cycle as well, a lot of noise has cleared out of this space. And so in every bear market, you observe that you have this core group of people who ultimately, they do love the tech, and they are tech nerds. They're tech people in their hearts. And so they get excited because they see they don't only love, blockchain technology, they love all emerging and innovation technology. So of course, naturally, they're very excited to see how they fit into AI and how AI fits into them.
So if I cast my mind back to 2017, a lot of the discussions, at the time when I was going to Fintech meetups, and at that time you had like 20, 30 people in the room. But most of the talk was around AI, and, certainly towards the end of 2017, crypto, Ethereum, we spent a lot of time talking about smart contracts and blockchain as well. And we're now 6 years on, and it's kind of really struck me as to why is it taken this long for this kind of realization to come, when, the room's full of innovative kind of, people, but also the tech nerds as well. What do you think is, because it's really hard for me to, kind of detract from the cynical part, which is, hey, the hype cycles that we see, and, the kind of, to the moon and all of that side to it, to go, hey, well, where are the actual real use cases? And you kind of talked about a lot, which I've seen, with a number of businesses around health. So if you think through the pandemic that we had, the reason why we were able to, as a global community, get a kind of treatment for that within 12 months was because of AI. We were able to synthesize that data through AI. Where do you think, kind of the real kind of opportunity is, and the kind of, the actual natural fit for these two worlds to come together into real use cases that are going to kind of advance society?
I was trying to do research on the intersection of AI and virtual assets a few years ago when I was doing the National Blockchain Roadmap, and it was very, very hard to find any information. So I do agree with you that sometimes it does take a bit of a while of time for the narrative to emerge.
Yeah.
And when we have these mimetic or viral narratives that a large cohort of people can understand and repeat to their neighbor, that's when I think people start to accept the possibility and want to spend more time and pay attention. Let me give you an example, one in each direction. So I think, the kind of techno-futuristic, maybe dramatic example would be, you've got an investment fund on chain that is completely managed by an AI, and no human can interfere or stop it. And the AI, does whatever it.
Sign me up. Sign me up now. It's no fees, right?
It's essentially running a business, right? You've got an investment fund with no human managers involved. That's really not very hard to imagine if you think about the fact that we already have some assets on chain that are so decentralized that even the founders, who have said, oh, I wish I could go and change something about this thing I created, but I can't. And there are, the assets, it's like an object floating in space. They just exist on chain now, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. And so, I think that we could maybe see something emerge where an interim step is, okay, I'm a researcher of investment theories, and I want to set up an investment portfolio according to a particular data set, a backward-looking or forward-looking theory, and I'm going to use this AI tooling. I'm going to get the AI to actually write up the code according to these algorithms, and the AI is actually going to implement the code and execute the trades and basically do all of the grunt work of setting up and managing the fund. But I, as the financial engineer, will continue to have some human involvement because I do have a key and I can make changes, and I'm going to sell this as a financial product. And now, this is again promoting Vara, but you can actually go and get a license to be that asset manager on chain, because there are a couple of progressive policymakers around the world who will allow this combination of technology to be used in this way. I'm sort of saying, okay, we can actually see how we would get to a place where we had an AI managed investment fund. But we also can see, going in the reverse way, there are a lot of debates as well that have been raging for years about big tech and tech platforms. Yeah. And this is a really interesting angle to the AI discussion as well. And I think something that people are quite concerned about. And we've seen some countries that have banned ChatGPT.
I don't know if you've seen today. So the head of AI at Google's actually resigned and has kind of gone a flip 180 and is now, we've got to stop this. It's too dangerous. Which my kind of next question to you is going to be what we've seen in digital asset space and crypto in particular in the last 12 months. The kind of lack of regulation has created some real big, like disastrous stuff, right? Combining that with AI, which is even less regulated than the digital asset space, seems kind of fairly volatile. How do you think we get through this, and what do you think that the timeline is for governments to actually act? Because it seems to me like it seems to be getting a bit close to being edgy now.
I think governments generally have three options. If they think something is clearly negative, they will ban it.
Yeah.
If they think that something has a mix of pros and cons, they will regulate it. But if governments actually don't know what their interests are, they will do nothing, because they will retain option value and wait and watch and see what other countries do. And so with emerging technology, and this is especially the case in blockchain, but it's also true for AI, a lot of governments don't know what their interests are.
Yeah.
And there are parts of governments internally, departments that actually have opposing interests or conflicts within the government, and they need to negotiate. And so that can take a very long time and mean that policy responses are delayed. So in the meantime, you will have some politicians who are incentivized to lobby for a quick and blunt course of action, because nuance takes a really long time. And that's when you get reactive knee-jerk policy reactions. So I think that the risk here is, as with blockchain, you throw the baby out with the bathwater. You ban things without really exploring what other options there are, and then you lose your first mover advantages, as someone else who's got a slightly better adjusted risk appetite is able to start to lead in a particular product or innovate in an area and generate IP that then becomes a strategic asset. So generally, if you have a healthy relationship between the public and private sectors where you can actually look at a range of options, you will hopefully get a better policy outcome. I don't think that the best approach is to ban AI.
Yeah.
So, there's no shortcut to doing that nuanced work and actually putting some resources into understanding what are the risks, what are the benefits, and what costs are we willing to bear to reap the rewards of the innovation.
Now, I guess one country who's probably been forging ahead in the AI space is China. Where they've really been lagging is in the blockchain space, and probably been the most forceful of all nations in kind of that other thing that you talked about, which is if they don't want it, they'll just block it or ban it. But then we've seen recently that started to ease. Hong Kong now is being presented as a place where, they're going to be digital asset friendly. I've heard kind of mixed reviews. Some people have been excited, others have been a bit cautious. What's your take on Hong Kong as a kind of center for innovation and digital assets?
People in the industry are certainly talking about Hong Kong, and the news that's been circulating in the last couple of days around Hong Kong's support for providing banking services to the crypto industry is really positive. Banking is extremely valuable and something that is an ongoing struggle for the blockchain industry. At the same time, we've seen that Hong Kong's track record has left a lot of people quite wary. They know that China has a huge amount of influence there, and China often, likes to ban blockchain-related business models, as you've said. So I don't see any businesses that are rushing to go and set up in Hong Kong, but they are certainly paying attention. They're talking about it. I think the hope at the moment is that these more progressive jurisdictions like Hong Kong will influence other jurisdictions to want to compete. And so if there's a critical mass of competition and jurisdictions start to see the benefit of that, then everybody benefits. And so, we do, I think, keep a close eye on how things develop in Hong Kong. But at the moment, I don't know anyone who sort of approaching this, without a grain of salt, just because of that track record. And I think it does make people a bit nervous.
Yeah. Now, as an economist, yourself, and I'm somebody who has a deep interest in certainly global economics and the dynamics that we're seeing, particularly between China and the US. There's a really interesting conversation at Consensus last week with Jeremy Allaire, the CEO of Circle, who was really warning of the de-dollarization. We've seen this recent banking crisis, and the All-In podcast talking about hyperinflation and, pushing for bank runs and all this crazy stuff that's been going down. Where do you see, the events that have happened recently, and where do you think it kind of pitches, the technology for, what could be the beginning of essentially a new world order, right? Like, I'm not going to make any kind of predictions around China being the new world order, but it certainly seems like the things are changing quite quickly.
I've observed that a lot of stablecoin advocates and some CBDC advocates, they like to talk about accelerating de-dollarization as an argument in favor of using blockchain to tokenize the US dollar as a way of defending the US's position. I don't know if de-dollarization is happening as rapidly as Jeremy suggests. There actually have been a lot of trade deals negotiated outside of the US dollar for a long time, but those kinds of deals have been getting more attention recently as people have become more aware.
Yeah, we've also, I guess, seen the sanctions with Russia and kind of through the war as well, which maybe has kind of heightened that awareness.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that this is actually just a bubbling along of a trend that's actually been established for some time, and it makes sense with the sanctions on Russia that this is continuing. But the world order has been evolving for a couple of decades in this direction. So this is not like a sudden phenomenon. Having said all of that, there are genuine issues to think through when we talk about what is the role of the US dollar in the world economy? How does it benefit the US and the world? What does it cost the US and the world? The former Bank of England governor, Mark Carney, in his last year of his term as governor, gave a really interesting speech at Jackson Hole, where central bank governors convene And he set out in that speech an argument for creating like a central bank digital currency that was like a world currency, a new reserve currency that would replace the US dollar as being the world reserve. And, that's so interesting because for a sitting Bank of England governor to kind of set out that argument, I think it's an interesting voice to send that message. But if you go and find this speech online and read through it, it's, I think, really worth reflecting on because he does a great job of setting out some reasons why this global basket of currencies, if you tokenize it and you have that as a world reserve, that could actually be quite good for global economics. I think that we also in this conversation need to think about the interplay between central banks and public finance and the private banking sector. And so, the argument goes that the traditional banking sector faces a threat from blockchain. And so, and they face a threat from fintech and neobanks. Yeah. And so their job is to retain their market power by lobbying for moats around themselves. And what you've seen over the last, 35 years is that the banking sector has been slowly collapsing. Yeah. We've seen rising compliance costs and new government policies that come in with every crisis situation, and that those rising compliance costs cause more consolidation in the industry. And so, the number of US banks 35 years ago was around 16,000. And now there's less than 5,000. So it's been, there's less than a third of the number of banks left than there was a few decades ago. And that linear trend where it's just shrinking and shrinking, there's no indication that trend is going to stop at all. So despite the fact that banks have succeeded in, blocking out a lot of fintech and neobanks from emerging as real competition, they haven't been able to actually maintain their own existence very successfully. Yeah. And so what are the implications of CBDCs potentially displacing private finance even further than the costs of compliance and regulation are already doing? I think that's something that governments and central banks are aware of, but because of the geopolitical overlay that's causing competition in the CBDC space, there are so many different considerations here. And, we haven't even talked about implications for consumers. Yeah. So, this is a very, very complicated discussion. And I think that there hasn't been a very good assessment so far of the costs and benefits to these different stakeholder groups.
Now, kind of going back, 8-9 months back with the collapse of Luna, whilst it was not a positive thing in any shape or form, it did to an extent show, and certainly that what we've seen, particularly with Bitcoin, show that the technology works. Maybe, the human interaction doesn't. Now, conversation that we had earlier around the synergies between AI and blockchain technology. If you look at what we've got 3 today now with First Republic, I think that's 3 bank collapses in the US in the last 3 months. None of them had to do anything with blockchain or fintech. It had to do with poor treasury management. Now, there's somebody in my network that put up a post today, and I don't know if this is true or not, but the value of those 3 banks combined was actually more than the value of the 35 banks that went down in the GFC in the US. So the point that you've been making about, this kind of slow collapse of the banking system is, we're seeing more, fewer banks, but they're actually holding more in deposits. And, the treasury management kind of isn't up to scratch. It poses a real risk, right?
That's the irony of the whole situation, Dexter, is that these regulations get brought in supposedly to reduce risk in the system, and the system keeps consolidating, and then you have these too big to fail banks. Yeah. And so, we've had top 20 bank failures in this recent period over the last few months. And so I think that there's a lot of anger at the moment as well about the inconsistency of how governments have responded to each individual case. It feels like they're picking winners and losers, or people to save and people that they'll let drown. And that's adding to a lot of the suspicion as well around Operation Choke Point 2.0. And I think it's really adding fuel to the fire about does the US want to be a facilitative environment for this kind of emerging technology? I think that the conclusion that people have drawn is clearly not.
Yeah.
There's been very little by way of efforts to engage constructively on clarifying regulations. And so, I think that we've really seen that people now have to make some very difficult decisions about whether they want to continue to try and build in what is not only a difficult economic environment, but a very difficult political environment.
Now, we've talked about tokenization a bit, and particularly with reference to CBDCs, but I wanted to chat with you about another, concept around tokenization, which is fractional investment. And particularly, I think there was an article that I sent you around, how blockchain technology is being used to co-fund a luxury hotel that's being built in Bali. This is a concept that's not new. I kind of, go back to, BrickX, Aussie Fintech that, tried to push the concept of fractional investment in Australian property and give people the opportunity to get involved in the property market. Great concept, great idea, but the kind of behavioral economics aspect of it didn't quite get traction. What do you see as kind of being different this time around by using blockchain technology to kind of, make work a concept that so far has failed in its execution?
I think that the focus on retail is where a lot of people have kind of missed the mark here.
Yeah.
And so, there's actually a real market of B2B assets and investment assets that are for sophisticated investors, where it's not supposed to be necessarily a high volume, high turnover, low value, retail app application of this fractionalization tokenization model. What I'm seeing in my work is that there are businesses who they have established asset management services and financial products. They see that the advantage of tokenizing those products is to be able to add liquidity to that market. By adding liquidity to that market, they can expand the services they provide. And so that's really what's important about tokenization. When you fractionalize an asset that in the Web 2 world would be very hard or very expensive to fractionalize and to manage the liquidity of those fractional contracts, now suddenly it becomes economical for you to offer that.
Yeah.
And so I recently supported a client in Singapore with this exact concept. They have taken their assets that are only for approved accredited investors, but they've said, well, even if you're a sophisticated investor, it doesn't necessarily mean that you want to put huge chunks of money into one single investment opportunity. You may still want to diversify many assets. And so how do we fractionalize and break this down? And so I think that kind of institutional finance, B2B opportunities, taking existing business models and adding liquidity to the markets that they manage, that is a much more interesting prospect than I think some of these retail pop kinds of applications. We talk about someone, like BrickX, buying a very small fraction of real estate. The real estate example is the most common example that we tend to hear about when we hear about tokenization. And the reason I think that that's the wrong case study is because when we talk about residential real estate, that's strictly, it's not an investment asset in pure terms. It's a consumable asset. And people make decisions that are not necessarily intended to be, financial decisions, even though they implicitly are, but they're making emotional decisions and lifestyle decisions. And so it's probably a little bit of a distraction, and sometimes of clickbait as well, because it resonates with people, because residential real estate is something that people can connect with easily as a story, but I don't think it's the best way to understand the benefits of tokenization.
Now we're kind of coming to a wrap, Chloe. But before we do, what's next for you?
Well, I'm going to be continuing to support companies who are wanting to get licensed in Dubai, tokenization, asset management, token issuers who are building blockchain native solutions. It's very exciting. So, this is kind of where I'm putting all of my energy at the moment. And, continuing as well to do research on stablecoins and to support the stablecoin subsector, something that I am just still so fascinated by, and I think is such an obvious use case for this fintech. So, that's kind of me right now. I am really looking forward to the conference this week and meeting other researchers in the space. And then next, or not even next month, in a couple of weeks, I'll be in Australia catching up.
Welcome home.
Down under. Yeah, thanks. So that'll be my next destination.
Fantastic. Well, Chloe, it's, as always, great to catch up. Thanks for sharing your insights, and I look forward to doing this again next month.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Dexter.
And you can connect with me, folks, on LinkedIn and Twitter. If you're coming back, thanks for your support. And if you're new to the show, make sure to give us a subscribe and follow us on your podcast player. Until the next episode, keep well. Blockchain Chatter, presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in fintech executive search.